What, you have a podcast?
I want to talk to your brother. Start a podcast, right?
They're eating the dogs, the people that came in. They're eating the cats. They're eating the pets. I probably took a bullet to the head. Now she wants to do transgender operations on illegal aliens that are in prison.
Hello, friends and enemies, and welcome to another episode of Recovery from Politics Podcast. I am your host, Kyle Frame, and today is Wednesday, October 23rd, 2024. I don't really have a thing specifically that I wanted to focus on today. It's kind of a grab bag of all the headlines. We'll start with something that I had to say earlier on Monday, was when South Korea went ahead and accused North Korea of sending in something like 10,000 special forces into Russia. I forget the city. Well, I remember the city. I don't want to try to pronounce it again. And that their purpose was to assist in the invasion of Ukraine. The U.S. Defense Chief, that would be Secretary Lloyd Austin. He was the guy who decided to take a 3-day nap to have a surgery and not tell his boss. And yes, I do think he should have been fired over that. I'm sorry. You're that high up in the chain of command. It's not like somebody else couldn't have filled in if you'd have just let someone know. I'm sorry, that's a security issue. You should have been fired on the spot for it. But whatever, Biden doesn't fire anybody, no matter how incompetent they prove to be. So he's still in. And anyway, he has confirmed that North Korean troops are in Russia. He didn't say how many. He didn't say what their purpose was or what exactly they were doing. But he did say that there were North Korean troops in Russia. Period. So, okay, we now have North Korea and the United States... South Korea and the United States going ahead and saying that they're there. South Korea and, of course, Ukraine, who, again, I explained on Monday, are trying to drum up any kind of support they can get for this thing. So that's there. We don't know what they're there for. Certainly, they could be there just for joint exercises. The two groups, North Korea and Russia, did sign a mutual defense pact agreement over the summer that kind of got everybody's hair ruffled. But there's no evidence that they're involved in Ukraine so far. We should still not go there. I mean, we have to at least consider the source of this knowledge originally was South Korea, and they went ahead and leapt that they're being trained, they're being equipped like Russians to look like Russians, which again I think is weird, and that they're going to assist in Ukraine, and so we need to do something about it, and South Korea is all really worried about it. And again, the whole purpose of South Korea is basically to antagonize North Korea. So it is curious to me because it makes no mention of China, and North Korea's biggest ally is China. Without China, North Korea just doesn't exist. They are heavily reliant on them for security purposes, if nothing else, because if it wasn't for security, I mean, if China was not going to defend North Korea, I think South Korea and the U.S. would have invaded a long time ago. Maybe not since they've had the nuclear bomb. That does complicate things. But without China's backing, North Korea simply doesn't exist. It is a thorn in too many people's sides. The United States and South Korea obviously have history there. They consider it unfinished. They don't want North Korea to exist, period, no matter what. So, yeah, sure. When South Korea gives you the perfect story or reason to be antagonistic towards North Korea, I say, trust but verify. And that's what we have so far. We have a story. The United States has verified, yes, there are troops. They haven't said how many troops. They haven't said what their purpose is. They haven't said anything. They did say it's a little weird. But again, if you consider the mutual defense pact they signed over the summer, it could be nothing more than a joint exercise. We don't know. And that's the whole point is... there's that. I do think this is acknowledgement by the United States that they don't want North Korea to be entering into the war in Ukraine, because that is an escalation both of North Korea and of Russia, and the United States would probably feel forced to, expand as well, and we don't want to do that. We clearly don't. I think that's the signal from here. You can see this kind of stuff with a Democratic administration. If this were Trump right now, he'd be tweeting out, fire, fury, all that bullshit, assuming he was on the side of Ukraine, which He's not, so I doubt even that would come out. But that's one story that's out today that I thought was interesting. Another thing, The Guardian is reporting that United States schools, the public schools, used up $3.2 billion fending off right-wing culture attacks. So anytime there's one of these stories, especially when Trump amplifies them on a massive debate stage, where he says that, schools are trying to turn your kids trans, or they're making your kids gay, or the library attacks where they're going after school libraries for having pornography in them when it's not. Sorry. The schools have to respond to that, because what it does is it mobilizes the crazies, or maybe even the very concerned but helicoptery parents that we have here in this community. And what ends up happening is it could be as small as an email. It could be larger as, threats. It could be litigation. It could be they're going to, town halls, to school boards, and they're making their voices heard no matter how batshit crazy they sound. And what ends up happening is if you calculate the cost of that, so you have teachers and administrators possibly leaving the school district because they're like, hey, I don't want to deal with death threats. I'm just trying to teach math, right? So the teachers leave, the administrators leave. Sometimes the nurses have been known to leave. School counselors leave because now, parents are really mad that they're talking to their kids about anything. So you take that as a value, but then also a lot of schools are having to hire PR firms, lawyers, extra security, because now they feel, well, we've got death threats, so we have to take them seriously, and you do want them to take it seriously. So instead of hiring, security or reinforcing, the schools to protect our kids against this gun violence, now we also have to worry about vigilante, insane conspiracy theory violence as well. So they said they calculated all this together. They put it together. They're like, even a school that is on the low end of this harassment campaign can spend as much as $250,000 per year dealing with it. And you're talking about also the time it takes to respond to all those emails, phone calls, text messages, everything. Again, everything does have some monetary value. So time spent answering an email of, "Are you turning my kid gay?" is time taken away from that teacher grading papers or preparing the next lesson or even tutoring another child. So, it all has a monetary value, and The Guardian went ahead and said that there was a study done. Then they surveyed, 467 schools and found funds that were supposed to be for learning improvements were diverted to PR and attorneys and security in the wake of all this targeting, to the amount of $3.2 billion in just 1 year. So we can imagine, and I don't really think it'll change no matter who wins the next election. That's one of the downsides to these conspiracy theories, is they're not going to go away, right? They have the potential to get worse under either administration, really. It just depends on what the other side's going to do. For example, if Trump becomes president, he's going to continue to amplify, and because just by virtue of being president, he's going to be given a louder speaker with which to do this. He will legislate things against them, but a lot of parents will still feel that, well, the president said, and they'll go out with that because the president historically has been a trusted figure. So some people who normally would ignore this crap when they hear the president say it are going to take action. So that could cause it to get worse. Similarly, if Harris is president, you're still going to have the current crop of crazies. They're not going away. They might even think now that Harris is in, it might get even worse, so they could amp up their attacks. And then it depends on what Trump does. If Trump or Vance or whoever wants to try to take that mantle from Trump, because obviously I don't think anybody thinks he's going to run again in 28. The man is sundowning hardcore. You can see it. So I think, obviously as soon as this election is over, whether he wins or not, there's going to be some jockeying on the right for who is the heir apparent. So whoever that person is, could be Trump himself for a little bit, could be Vance. They are going to have an elevated platform, and they are going to attack the Harris administration for, mandating trans conversion in schools, some other conspiracy theory bullshit. They're going to go out of their way and do it, and that could also amp it up. So I don't see, there's scenarios where this gets worse no matter who wins, unfortunately. And I think the best case scenario would be a Harris administration, because they probably see a headline like this, $3.2 billion, and are like, okay, well, we will go to the Department of Education and we will increase funding and maybe create a small corner of that department. Now we'll deal specifically with these culture attacks. And that'll be their job, and they'll remove the $3.2 billion away from the local level and put it onto the federal government's shoulders, where they can handle that amount a little easier. Plus, they can even dissuade it, because when you're going up against little local school boards, it's a lot easier for a private citizen to stick their chest out and try to talk all big and bad and buff. When you potentially are sitting across from the Attorney General of the United States of America, it's a little harder to get big and bad in that moment. So that is the best case scenario that I see coming forward. Obviously, if it's Trump, I think he'll just fan the flames of this and make it worse, as he does everything. I don't think Harris could reverse the trend. The best case for stuff like this is just to not fuel it. You have to tamp down the flames. But then just create a nothing burger out of it. So for me, in the 90s, there was this huge thing, and it also happened during the 80s, that there was a huge militia movement, right? There was a huge militia movement, a lot of guys going out into the woods, learning how to do things, and militia attendance went up, especially during Clinton. Everybody thought Clinton was going to do everything. Then there was Waco, which confirmed their already preconceived bias of Clinton. So there was a huge event. Well, then nothing happened, right? Waco happened. There were investigations. There were heads rolled. And then no news stories came up. The government didn't do anything. And what ends up happening is you have people who get into it with all the fervor that one could possibly muster for something like this. And then nothing happens. It's kind of like right now, the right is telling you the economy's terrible, the country's in the toilet, yada, yada, yada. But if you keep waking up every day and going outside and looking around, I live in a neighborhood where houses are being built right now. So you can tell me the economy's trash and that the world's going to hell and that there's all this crime and everything else. I'm not seeing it. Now, I'm not saying it's not happening, but I'm saying I'm not seeing it. And the more people you can get to wake up every day and just be like, I'm not seeing the hell on earth that these people are telling me about, right? That's why Fox, keeps it demographically a certain way. Like they always talk about New York or Los Angeles, because they know the bulk of the people that are watching their programs are not in New York or Los Angeles. So they can go ahead and say, look, this place far away from here, it's a shithole, car fires, crime, homelessness, it's really bad, look at it all, it's horrible, it's horrible, it's horrible. And unless the people actually go and visit those areas, which, again, unlikely, considering they keep hearing what a shithole they are, they're not going to know any better. And unless somebody directly confronts them and is like, no, actually, I was in New York last week, it's nothing like what they say, they're going to continue to believe it. But the point is like time and distance is really what you need to tamp down on conspiracy theories, which unfortunately, I guess it is going to be conspiracy theory day, because another headline that the Washington Post is running with is over 230 Republican candidates have cast doubt on the 2024 election. Okay, so this is a problem because normally the conspiracy theories traditionally have been, the dark web, the white supremacist groups, the crazies on the internet who are in it just for clicks kind of a deal. They're the ones that want to go ahead and, really do the conspiracy theory thing. The problem now that we face is that the conspiracy theories are being driven and created and pushed out by our Congress people. There was a line somewhere, when you had Woodstock and you had all the hippies and the anti-war protesters and everything else, very few of those people rose to any prominence within the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party acknowledged them, but, moved on. Nobody voted for the guy who was yelling baby killer and throwing things at soldiers, something that never happened, but whatever. So the Democratic Party wasn't considered a threat, whereas when the Tea Party really came in, all of a sudden you had all these rock-slinging, flamethrowers who wanted conspiracy theories to drive the day that the Obamacare was going to put grandma in the electric chair, basically. Nobody worried about them, but then all of a sudden you had Palin rise to prominence, and it all just kind of rose up from there, where it was like, oh, Republicans didn't just start saying these things, they started being replaced. Remember Eric Cantor? So John Boehner was if he wasn't a majority leader, he was Speaker of the House at one point. He was thinking about, it was time for him to retire. He really didn't like it. And also he had an extremely difficult time keeping his caucus together because he did have that Tea Party group. So he was like, hey, I've got it. There's this young, fresh-faced guy, Eric Cantor. I'll go ahead and turn it over to him. And then Eric Cantor got primaried by one of those Tea Party people and blew up the whole thing. So Boehner felt compelled to stick around a little longer than he would have liked. And that kind of changed everything, because what ended up happening was, unlike in the 60s and 70s when the left was attacking Democrats, they weren't beating Democrats in primaries. They weren't running against Democrats in primaries and winning. Whereas over here these days, what happens is you're a conspiracy theorist, you get a little bit of leverage, maybe you get a story written about you, and then you go ahead and you challenge your local congressman, who's also a Republican, who maybe even parrots your conspiracy theories, but he's not conspiracy theory enough, and then they take over. So basically the foxes have taken the hen house, and now it's just a bunch of foxes in there. But the problem is, even though we had all these lunatics and the foxes were running the hen house and they were the new hens, you still had new foxes like Marjorie Taylor Greene coming in, who is still, to this day, even though she is a sitting congressperson, talking about how the government can control hurricanes and, Jewish space lasers and all that other BS. She's there. She's still there. She's still doing her thing, and she's not even one of the craziest. There are crazy people running for office who are now challenging the last group. There are Tea Partiers who are now removed. They can no longer be there. So this conspiracy problem that we have, they're in charge now, and it's a feedback loop. Conspiracy theories say something, Congress feeds it back to them, the public hears both now, and they're like, well, you have this, and then, you also got Fox News involved. You got the whole media, Newsmax, Fox News, One American Network. They're all going there. So if you're a Republican, all your friends are Republicans because, maybe you live in one of those small towns, whatever. So you live there. All your friends are talking about this crazy conspiracy theory that the Democrats are going to steal the election. And you might even think, that's bullshit. But when you go on social media, all you see are people saying, hey, the Democrats are going to steal this election. And then all of a sudden, your congressman who you follow says the Democrats are going to steal this election. And then your senator says the Democrats are going to steal this election. And the governor of the state you live in says the Democrats are going to steal the election. And then you turn on the news, and the news is telling you the Democrats are going to steal the election. What do you think's going to happen? It's this entire feedback loop, and it does take an extremely strong-minded, diligent. It takes work to break out of that bubble, to be like, wait a minute. Everybody's telling me the same thing. Maybe I need to step out and, try to find something else. It takes a very diligent, disciplined person to do that. And most of us, that's assuming you have time to do that. If you're just going about your day, you're way too busy to try to do that. So you're screwed. You live in this bubble, and then, everybody wonders, is like, how does this happen? And it's like, well, it's really not that hard now. We have an entire half of this country that has been radicalized just by virtue of having been Republican for so long and not changing their bubble and not having time to look at things, not having time to sit and explain. And then you go ahead and add in smart devices like your phone, where the whole point of it is to remain distracted so you don't pay attention as to how long you're on it. That's why you have the, infinite scroll going on, is because they don't want you to hit the bottom of the page where you have to push a button to hit next page, because you might actually take that half second to be like, wait a minute, what time is it? How long have I been on this? It's like in the old days when you sat in the bathroom, all you had was the back of the shampoo bottle to read, and now all of a sudden you've got your phone there, and you're like, why are my legs always falling asleep in here? So all of this is just coming together at the completely wrong time, unfortunately. And there's never a good time or right time for this to happen. I mean, Trump wasn't born out of a vacuum. If Trump ran, 40 years ago, he never would have won because the environment wasn't ready for him. But in this case, in 2016, the environment was ready and willing. And also the left, the Democrats, and anybody even center right, all the way to the far left, were not ready for that scenario. They didn't know how to combat it. They were still like, what's going on? And to a degree, we're still playing catch up. If you go right now to the top podcasts and the top news sites, there's still Fox News and Bannon's War Room and all that. Like, the right has got complete and total control over our media diets for people who want to expand into the news. So this is scary stuff, and I don't know how we're going to get out of it other than, again, we need time and we need distance. We need the Democrats, unfortunately, to keep winning and to be very boring and unoffensive and bland, because if they don't even have to do anything. The right is going to accuse them of trying to take over the country and end it, but they have to make it so that people step out of their bubble, and even just once, if they can just step out of their house and see that everything isn't falling apart. Oh, maybe there's nothing to this. Because when your world is fine, you don't pay attention to the news as much. I mean, we only turn on the news really when something's going on, or, there are people who want to be informed. Thanks for listening. But most people, they only turn on the news just because something's going on and they want to know what's going on. Well, if nothing's going on, you don't turn on the news, and then maybe you can break that feedback loop. There are some laws that can go into this. Like I said, we have the infinite scroll. I think that should be outlawed. I think they should just remove that. I think the government has to, because the incentive is for the tech companies not to remove it. Again, because they make money by how much time you spend on their app and on their phone. If you put your phone down and leave it, they're not making any money. So they have to keep you on. They have to keep you scrolling. I would end infinite scroll as a minimum. There are other measures you can take, but that's one that you could do, because we've trained our brains to constantly seek affirmation and information, and then, just add into it this very unique American thing of you have to always be productive. So some people can trick themselves into, no, actually I'm being productive scrolling right now because I'm learning and I'm informing myself and I'm keeping up to date on the news and everything else. And yeah, we need to put that down. But furthering down into the conspiracy theory rabbit hole, I saw this one that's absolutely terrifying. Again, Washington Post, how a conspiracy-fueled group got a foothold in this hurricane-battered town. Yes. So, this place called Lake Lure, North Carolina, got hit with Hurricane Helene. Absolutely devastated. A couple people decided, we're going to hand out hot coffee because that's the only thing we can do in a parking lot. The parking lot eventually grew to, that's where the water and clothes and anything people needed would go. So a lot of people started going there. And then all of a sudden, this group called Veterans on Patrol showed up. They had no supplies. It was just a bunch of people. One of them, named Lewis Arthur, who's their leader, said he was sent from God on a 3-year plan to help this lakeside community bounce back. Well, he's got issues. He's got a history. He says that he spent a lot of time on the border fighting cartels, and he's really big into armed security. And he basically tried to take over the entire operation. He was trying to funnel money and supplies away from who they needed. There was a Hispanic woman who lives in the area who tried to get supplies, and he and his group just descended on her and were like, you've been here before, you're taking things, and blah, blah, all this other stuff. Very anti-FEMA. He apparently talks about hunting FEMA. He's going armed everywhere. But there are groups like this, more conspiracy theory groups that believe that the hurricane was path was changed specifically to steal lithium from this town in North Carolina. Okay, so 60 miles away from the town is in fact a lithium mine. It was not hit by the hurricane, you would think. Let me just dispel any ideas that anyone possibly has, or if you know one of these people, you could just tell them about it. It's called eminent domain. The United States government does not need a hurricane to get you off your land. If they want to take your house, if they want to bulldoze your community, they merely have to go to court and they will win. It's called eminent domain. They always win. They give you a check for whatever market value is for your property, and then they kick you the fuck off of it. Happens all the time. You can trust me. It's happened a lot, and the Supreme Court and everyone on down agrees that it happens, and it's totally cool with it. All the government has to do is say, we need this land, and that's fucking it, okay? If there was, for example, a huge lithium thing, and the United States government said, it's a national security thing, we have to seize this land and mine all this lithium now for our microchips, otherwise China will destroy us, right? That's all they have to do. And then they don't even hire a lawyer. They have lawyers that work on eminent domain 24/7, and they would just send them there and be like, yeah, your town no longer exists. Here's a check. Fucking move. It would be that easy. The government rarely ever loses one of those cases. Okay? They do their due diligence. So if you're sitting or living near a lithium mine or a huge deposit of really rare ore or minerals, and you're like, oh my God, the government's going to steal it from me. Yes, they could if they wanted, but it won't come in a hurricane, okay? FEMA's not there to steal your shit. FEMA's there to give you water, maybe a generator so you can warm your fucking house, okay? FEMA's not there to steal your things. FEMA would be the worst way to steal your shit, okay? Again, they have the courts on their side. This is the easiest thing in the world. So for these people to go around saying that FEMA's doing it is like, it's just a bunch of idiots that don't understand how this government works, that there is a very real thing that they can use. It is a tool backed up by all the courts, and every lawyer in the country knows about it. No one thinks FEMA is good. Why would you use FEMA to do this? Why? They wouldn't. They wouldn't. Eminent domain, cut you a check, send you on your way. If you don't leave, they just get the police. They would hire the local sheriff, who they probably also just bought out so he would move. He would be the one knocking on your door constantly and kick you the fuck out of your house. The feds wouldn't even get involved. They'd just wait for the local sheriff to kick you out. And it wouldn't take long. Eventually, you'll get hungry. Okay? They'll cut the power to your house. Maybe they'll cut the water. And they'll just wait for you to come out. And then they won't arrest you. They'll just walk your sorry sack of an ass out. That's it. They don't need to use... The federal government doesn't need to do this. This would be the hardest way to do it. It really would. It's nuts to me that people believe this. Of course, everyone... This is just... People don't want to believe that global warming and that it's possible that they had an effect on this, that their voting had an effect. And rather than understand that global warming has supercharged these storms and is going to send them into areas that have never experienced them before and isn't ready for them... Rather than accepting that the world is changing around them, and I'm sorry to say, I don't think there's anything we can do about it. Rather than do that, they would rather cling to this conspiracy theory of, the government can control the weather, and they're sending the emergency responders to remove me from my land and not let me back because they want lithium. I'm sorry. That's way more complicated than the truth. And the truth is, unfortunately, we have pumped and we've extracted enough raw material from this earth and put enough CO2 into the air that we have officially reached the point we cannot plant enough trees. If every square inch of this earth were covered in trees, even the areas that currently can't support trees, we're counting Antarctica and, deserts where nothing grows. Even if it could grow, if we could put all the trees, if every square inch, and we bulldozed all our houses and replaced them with trees, and we ourselves could transport off the planet, if we could plant every square inch of this earth with trees, we would not reverse global warming. What we're at now is what we will be the rest of our lives. We're at that point. If we stopped polluting today, if just everything stopped, nothing would reverse. It would never reverse. By never, I mean like more in our lifetimes. Our lifetimes, our children's lifetimes. It would take multiple generations, thousands of years for it to reverse. There were millions of years of trees and plants and vegetation growing up, falling over, being absorbed back into the earth, layer, over and over again, creating those oil deposits that we have now ripped up, that we've pulled out of the earth, and we've now put the CO2 back into the atmosphere. You can't replace that overnight. You can't replace that in 100 years. You can't replace that in 1,000 years. We're talking millions of years of Earth to get to the point where it was habitable for human beings, where we were in that nice, happy zone that we are in. We'll never get back there. We can't. That's why, you have idiots and tech bros like Musk talking about CO2 extraction from the atmosphere, because it is verifiable. We can't naturally reverse the trend. We can't go back to the way it was. This year is the hottest year on record. And if we don't stop everything right now, next year will be the hottest year on record. And the year after that will break that record, and the year after that will break that record. You may have one of those El Nino, La Nina years that causes a fluctuation, and it'll be the coldest year in the last 10, but it'll go right back. We're done unless we stop. That's the whole point of all of this. The Paris Accords and everything else is just about mitigating the disaster. We have shot past stopping this or reversing it. The time to do that was in the 70s and 80s when the first people started bringing it up. And then the next chance to do that was probably electing Vice President Gore to be president in 2000, but we let that one go too because we wanted to have a beer. But since then, we have been on this trajectory. It is not stopping. And that is really dire and sad, especially for those of us with kids or those of us who want to have kids. Like, you are bringing your children, you are raising children to face a world that will be worse than the ones you were born in. And every single person born today will be born into a world worse than their parents had. And it will be thousands of years before that changes on Earth. And that's the best guess. We are hoping that there is a technological solution that we can extract the CO2 and put it somewhere. We're hoping. But right now, the only thing we can do is mitigate it. And rather than face that truth, which is hard, and it is sad, and it is dire, and it wants to make you just sit back and fucking drink the day away because there's nothing you can do about it. Rather than do that, you have a lot of people who I understand, I sympathize with, who are like, I can't let my brain go there. So they will cling to these conspiracy theories. And unless our politicians are truthful with us, and I mean really across the board, it can't just be one person screaming against the wind. It's got to be all of them, every single one of them, both parties, the news media, all of it, the entire establishment, not just one side or another. Like, everyone has to get on the same page and tell their people the same thing, the truth. The world sucks, and it's going to keep getting worse until we stop all fossil fuel emissions. All of them. And then, only then, when the whole world, not even just us, sadly, right? China, India, every other country on the world has to stop too. At that point, we can look and be like, okay, this is the world we live in. and it's static. And then we can think about reversing the trend if there is a way to do it. But until then, it's going to be hard. And yeah, a lot of you are going to lose jobs. But guess what? All those people that got hit by Helene, they're not working right now. Your town will be uprooted. You will be affected by this. You can blame the government, be like, they took my job away and they made it green and now I can't work it. Well, if you keep doing what you're doing, if it's not going to be that, it's going to be a hurricane coming in and flooding you. When you're living somewhere, you're like, there's never been a hurricane here in recorded history. Surprise! Now there are. Now there are. It's just going to get worse. I get it. I get it. You want the conspiracy theory to be true, because even if the conspiracy theory is crazy and laughable and way more complex, because if you ask me, it's way more complex to believe that the United States government can control hurricanes and they're diverting its path specifically into your mountain town to steal lithium. Like, that's way harder than the truth could ever be for me, but I would rather believe in that than face the undeniable truth, which is, yeah, we're all fucked and there's nothing I can do about it. My kids are I have doomed, just by having my kids, they are doomed to experience the world in a worse way than I had to. And there's not a damn thing we can do about it. Not us by ourselves. We can just sit on our couch. We can vote once every couple years. That's it. And then we have to hope and try to persuade these right-wing lunatics that we're right. And then you have these idiots where the hurricane rushes through their towns and where they don't want to face reality because it's hard. But we have to convince them. We have to go to the people that don't want to see this and that it's hard and don't want to admit it. We have to tell them, look, I know it's hard. It's rough. We're going to need Earth's Anonymous for everybody. Everybody's going to need to sit in a circle room and talk about how everything fucking sucks about the Earth. And there's not a damn thing we can do about it. But we got to fight the conspiracy theories together. And then you all stand up, hold hands, and pray at the end and be like, grant me, grant me the strength to change the things that I can. That's what we're going to need, because this is going to be rough. But I get the conspiracy theories, but you can't go down that road. It doesn't fix anything. There's this fantastic movie, it's a hard watch, American History X. And I think the best part of the film, the most like striking part of the film for me, it's not even the most memorable. There are memorable moments in it, but the best part of me, at one point, the protagonist, he's at his lowest point. Right? But he's still, he's clinging to his really right-wing racist views. He's like hardcore white supremacist. And a friend, a mentor, a black man, comes to him and says, you're asking the wrong questions. What's the right question? Has anything you've done made your life better? And in that realization, the main character, protagonist, he like, you could see it just melt away from his face. And he just starts just crying uncontrollably, like, no. All he did was fuck up his life going down this rabbit hole of hate. And that's what we're facing right now. We need to, get people to understand. It's like, you can cling to this hate. You can cling to these conspiracies. You can blame someone else. You can believe it's all an imaginary government that you have built up in your head to be all powerful and all knowing, and that's why they're doing it. Or you can believe the conspiracy theory that there's a all knowing, all loving God that just hit your town with a hurricane so you can learn about it. Whatever. You can buy into that, and nothing in your life will get better. Or you can work to change it. You can try to face it. You can grow as a human being and accept the things you cannot change. Work to change the things you can. And it's harder to do that. It is really easy to hate. It's really easy to buy into a conspiracy. They're designed for our brains. Our brains are designed to accept a conspiracy. We haven't always been thinking, speaking species. We evolved from very, very simple primates who did not understand the world around them at all. They only understood a 10-foot radius around them. They didn't get it. Sun go up, sun go down. Right? And we've evolved from that. And our brains still would prefer the mystical Skyman controlling everything, whether it be a real mystical Skyman or the federal government can control hurricanes. We would still much rather believe that. Especially in the face of this thing. That's why global warming is such a sinister, evil fucking thing we've got to deal with, because it's slow and it seems so big. I mean, at first you don't want to believe that we can affect the planet, but then the other realization of, we are affecting it, and then it's too big of a problem to solve. It's too big to fix. How do you fix this? How do you stop it? Anyway, that's our show today. Thank you very much for listening. Like, share, subscribe, all that good stuff, and we'll see you next time.